Welcome to our interactive discussion. I'm Robert Milstein on behalf of Thought Leader Global, and in collaboration with Vertex, we have brought everyone together to hear from indirect tax leaders tackling indirect tax compliance challenges in a move towards e-compliance and CTC. It's an interesting time to be an indirect tax leader. By the way, attendees, just to double check your connections, if you can hear me and see me, please give us a thumbs up in your emojis in the smiley face. I can see them. Wonderful. I was just looking on LinkedIn recently, and one of the interesting articles was about how we should have a glossary of all the different acronyms and terms, because in the world of indirect tax and technology, there's so many, CTC just being one of them, but so many that are emerging, and it's hard to keep track of them all. It's you speak a language all year round, and the language is evolving. The taxonomy, if you will, is changing as the challenges from regulation increases. So it's an exciting time to be in your profession, I think. So to the attendees, if you'd like to interact with us and give comments and questions, you can just put them all in the chat on the right side of the screen that you can see there. You can, if you click the people icon in the upper left, upper right corner, you can see who's online and send each other messages if you like. If you have time at the very end, you can join us in the lobby for some interactive networking. So I would like to thank all of our panelists for the preparation and for the time involved in being here to have their experiences shared. Thank you again to Vertex. I would like to introduce our moderator of today's discussion, Gunjan Tripathi, EMEA Director Solutions Marketing Vertex. She is an experienced tax advisor specializing in European VAT and indirect tax in general, has experience with the Big Four, has worked in a European Shared Service Center, has been a global VAT manager in a global company, and has worked in tax engine companies before as well. So thank you in advance. It's good to work with you again. And I hand the digital microphone to you.
Thanks, Robert. Thanks for the introduction. So without any further ado, I would like to invite my panelists to have an introduction with me. And simultaneously, Robert, this might be the best time to also get to know our attendees today. So let's fire up the poll. And first and foremost, I might just go in alphabetical order here. So Alexandra, over to you.
Hi, everyone, and thanks, Robert, for the invite for today's panel discussion. I'm a tax manager in the data and tax strategy team at Booking.com. I've been in indirect tax, I would say, around, over 10 years, I think 13 years now. My current focus at Booking is on billing and e-invoicing, so I think very relevant for today's discussion.
Thank you, Alexandra.
And, in terms of transactions, mainly it's services, of course, and cross-border and B2B, B2C, I would say.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Just for the reference of audience, we are also doing a bit of a snapshot into what areas of expertise we can grill our panelists today. So hence why the B2C, the B2G segments, or just whether we deal with business to business or consumers will be a recurring theme that we'll keep pegging back to. So thanks for that, Alexandra. Delphine, over to you, please.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Delphine Gerdewin, working in VAT for about 14 years now. And the last 3 years as a VAT manager at Medtronic, which is a leader in the medical device sector. I'm managing a team of 11 persons, which are split into 2 groups, so advisory and compliance. And if we look at our transaction, let's say, it's mainly domestic supplies of goods, B2B, B2G, but with some specific that our customer are hospitals, so without right of deduction. And our products have both high and low VAT rates in several countries.
Excellent. Thank you, Delphine. Ignacio, you seem to be on mute as well, so I just want to double check.
Hello, my name is Ignacio. I have around 13 years of experience dealing with VAT topics. I'm currently working as Global Senior Manager for Sandoz. I joined it 3 months ago, so it's a really new role. Previously, I was working in Dufry for 7 years. So I have around 7 years of experience in an in-house position. My role in Dufry was mainly B2B and also a lot of B2C. And right now in Sandoz is mainly B2B and cross-border transactions.
Thank you. Gorka.
Well, thanks for the opportunity to participate in this conversation. I'm really excited. So just briefly on me, I'm the global head of indirect tax at Lexmark. Lexmark is a US-based company specialized in printing solution and IoT. And well, in terms of my experience, let's put it in these terms that I've been doing VT for quite a while. I don't want to be more specific.
Thank you, Gorka. And then would you say from that tax lens, B2B, B2C, a bit of everything?
Well, our company is fully, I mean, it's mainly a B2B company, but from time to time we also have a few B2C transactions. But the core is B2B.
Perfect. Thank you. Manuel.
Yes, well, I have this long name, Manuel Raúl Corral Viejo, but everyone knows me by Raúl Corral.
Raúl.
So I'm now working in TE connectivity, so Tyco Electronics is as well known, the name. I'm more or less 10 years in the company. So in VAT in total, 16 years, 10 years in TE, and always working in American multinationals. So the main experience is on the B2B side. And right now I'm the manager for EMEA region. So we are covering 49 companies. From the 49 companies, 30 are manufacturing entities. And then we have as well 5 principals, one of them registered in 20 countries. So we have a lot of, let's say, VAT scenarios in the scope, and mainly B2B. So all the scenarios you can think about, exports, imports, domestic sales, EU sales, etc., but mainly B2B.
Thanks for everyone sharing some of these intricate details. And actually, let's take 30 seconds. Robert, what does our audience today look like in our live, given...
Okay,
So
I'm about to close the poll. If you haven't voted, last chance in the next 5 seconds. Okay, and final call. Okay, I'm closing. We had 50 votes, which is very high, actually. 11% are in finance, 7.4% in IT, 75.9% in tax.
Perfect.
Interesting.
So we can dive into the details.
We can totally go, and now we can use our lingo of B2B, B2C, B2G, domestic, cross-border, liberally. Okay, great. So before we jump into some of the weeds, I would like to go around the house and definitely ask, what is today the biggest or the tallest barrier that you experience in your role towards indirect tax compliance? I will keep this vague, but yes, VAT, GST, sales and use tax, given your remit, or sometimes also the remit of your teams that you interact or work with, what are the sort of really challenging pieces that are landing on your desk this year as we speak? I'll open the floor by inviting Delphine to maybe take a stab at this one first.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I think it's not a secret for everyone, but master data is a big piece of it, having everything in the system and correctly in the system. Another big piece which goes with the C2C is around the extraction of the data, ensuring you can easily extract the required set of data that you need to actually report what you have to report. And I think the big issue with the C2C is the constant evolving landscape, right? The established versus non-established. If you have a deadline which is normally set, it's postponed one day before the actual go live, so you can never, well, being really sure on what needs to be done by when. So I think those are the biggest challenges in terms of compliance.
So data and tracking legislation. Excellent. Thank you, Delphine. Gorka, Ignacio, anything different or similar? Go for it.
Ignacio, go first, please.
Thanks, Gorka. There is a lot of complexities that we have to deal, but one of them is sometimes the transactions are not in the system. There is something that is not happens that there's manual things that you cannot, the companies don't include it. So this is a risk that sometimes for VAT compliance that you can face. And usually is that sometimes is that the amount of information that you need to deal. So you need to have ways to check it. So that's a little bit one the challenges among the others that Delphine already mentioned.
Thank you. So really going and fishing out what you may not already know, but is existing out there. Fair enough. Gorka.
No, I don't have a lot to say on this point. I think probably the biggest risk or challenge that we've got is to be overconfident that we can be ready for all these challenges, and because we take for granted that our systems are ready, that our master data is not crappy. But then if we start really doing a proper analysis of all the elements that are needed to be ready, is where we find that a lot still need to be done. So, but at the same time, as the Finnish said, until the mandate is introduced in a given location, we are not going to have the attention of all the stakeholders to work into finding out what goes wrong. So I think we need to pray for the best that the countries are finally serious about their interest to introduce CTC, and because that will be opportunity to do a thorough cleanup and see, I mean, how best or how terrible we are prepared for that.
Gorka, I'm going to extend that for one more second, that piece, because you brought up a thing that I've always thought about, which is how long is too long to anticipate, or how long should the wait last from a knowing that we need to go live to actual go live date? Like, what's the sweet spot in an organization like yours?
Wow.
In your experience?
I guess that from 6 months to 1 year would be ideal.
Uh-huh.
But sometimes maybe it's better that you have less time, because if there's too much time between the announcement and the go live, people may get distracted with other priorities. So sweet spot maybe 6 months or so.
That's the practicalities.
Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense.
I don't know if somebody else has a different perspective on that.
Well, we can dive in there. So, Manuel, Raul, I'll bring you in from the initial question as well, and if you have perspective to extend Gorka's point.
Yeah, exactly. I fully agree. Yeah, with all the comments. Basically, the struggles or the challenges that we have is about data. We can call it in different ways, in different perspectives, but we are all struggling with data. How you extract, how it is in the system, how you find it. Yeah? And my question now would be, or what I'm questioning myself is, why we have this struggle? And then we go back to the requirements, yeah, because we are in a very challenging, changing, dynamic world where the authorities are moving very fast with requirements without sometimes counting on the companies, yeah, because as Gorka said, we need 6 months, 1 year. And Ignacio, Delphine as well, where is the data? So we have these real struggles that sometimes are adding this complexity when we try to be compliant. Yeah? So this is one of the challenges that we have today. Yeah? And it's just facing exactly the same topics that we are hearing in the first minutes of the conversation. We are all in the same boat, basically.
Alexandra, is your world any different, given that it's a very tech-led organization? Everything is on a platform. We see it as a sort of leader in its market for making everything tech-enabled. Like, is your life any different or simpler, hopefully?
I fully agree with everything that has been said. Our team has global responsibility, so I wouldn't necessarily think it's simpler. And yeah, there's so much regulations coming our way that are really tackling, let's say, the platforms or the tech companies, and that also results in, for example, indeed new data requirements, much more data, and also data that sometimes hasn't been captured or at least wasn't part of, let's say, standardized processes on how we pull our reports. So I would say it's a challenging, bumpy road, but a fun one to be on. It makes our lives interesting, right?
Yeah. And then you mash it with not just the data requirements for tax. We have to hear about the concerns of data privacy, of cultural practices around data, right? Certain countries, it's freely given and understood and used, and in other countries, whether it be businesses or people, they might be very skeptical to data sharing that then goes on to these information pieces. So it's interesting that all roads lead to Rome. In our case, data seems to be that source. Um, my next question was going to be about data quality, but we've already covered it as the biggest aspect. And I think this is what I'm also hearing in the market around these are the practical implications of moving towards a C2C sort of a mandate. So, given the current situations, given the different countries you deal with, um, are there any methodologies or systems or standards that you think that work better today and could be the way to go forward for others? Like if you were to give recommendations on, hey, XYZ works, why aren't we replicating this? Why aren't we going down? Because one thing is for sure, harmonization is not on the horizon, but everybody would hope for that. So any direction, and I'll flip it to Ignacio to maybe give us his crystal ball predictions on that one.
I mean, one of the main complexities that I see is that there is no harmonization at all. So we see that, especially in data, it's not everywhere the request is the same. So sometimes it's needed for certain countries one thing and another is another one. So I see it is a challenge. I don't know my colleagues how they said it, but it's complicated. Sometimes you need to decentralize those topics, and from a central perspective, it's complicated to at least to have uniform guidelines for everywhere. You can share best practice, but not always is going to be the same. So, and that's what complicates our lives, at least from a company perspective.
I think here there's a problem. The problem with the mindset. So we've been used to working in an environment where data was relevant, but it was not shared directly with the tax authorities, right? And now we need to do that on a constant basis, but we are not there, right? At least in Europe, I think Latin is a different story. So how can you really tell your stakeholders that this is coming, but it's except in two countries like Spain and Italy, what is real in the others has been constantly postponed. So that's why I was saying earlier, we need really the member states to get serious on that and impose either the Spanish model or the Italian model, and don't reinvent the wheel, right, with something else. And only then we realize, I mean, what else needs to be. The problem with the data is that maybe we believe that the data that we have stored is quite okay, right, for most of the local to local transactions. If we're operating that way, for cross-border, maybe we need a little bit more of that. We are probably not doing terribly if most of our transactions are intercompany, right, because we control, I mean, which entities are participating in the two sides of the transactions. But the reality is that once a country moves into C2C direction, they will be increasing the demands of the data that they want to collect. And that's really where the rubber meets the road, because we'll see that we are not capturing a lot of data. And again, in a company like Alessandra's, if they start asking more data to the customers, many will get really very disappointed, right, with the whole customer experience. So it can really affect the business. So I mean, in vacuum, I don't think we can do a lot right now. Maybe train some people, right, to tell them, well, this is coming. I mean, these are the things we will need to start doing slightly better. Maybe document the existing process, how we collect that, archive that, where this is available, so that when these projects start, we know, I mean, who to engage and what to do. But until we have a clear mandate, I mean, people are not going to spend their time really doing a thorough cleaning. I mean, you need, you can really throw them in the thread, and then with, I mean, well, the authorities will impose how many, I don't know how much of penalties, but until this is not in the works, it's planned, we will get nowhere. And Alexandra, sorry, you wanted to say
Oh,
something?
no, I wanted to say, I think it very much also depends on, let's say, the company you work for. Let's say, what's the country scope, how many transactions. For us, Booking.com, it's too big of a challenge to invest and build something ourselves. Of course, we need to prepare ourselves to, in any case, have all the data, which sometimes is a bit scattered across different systems or databases, to get that orchestrated and into one single point, and then work with a vendor and also vendor solutions in terms for e-invoicing. Yeah, there's no one vendor that covers all of the world. So you also have to be a bit smart on how you approach things. And I think sometimes you really have to look also a bit and categorize, let's say, the requirements or the countries. Is this a big market we want to focus on? Is this, let's say, or is this a country where we have a very little transactions, and then see how you can work and make it fit. Yeah, in that sense, because we would have a preference to have a vendor solution, in that sense, the vendor pretty much arranges all the connections, right, with the authorities. Of course, we still need a lot of work on the data and everything. But I think if you are maybe having a smaller amount of transactions and maybe purely domestic, it doesn't make sense to maybe go for a full-fledged bigger vendor where you maybe have to integrate via an API, and you might just need let's say incidental assistance from, and a boutique firm could help with that. So I think it very much depends on your position.
So, Alexandra, you raise a brilliant point, and I think this is the best time to also maybe prod our audience to think about how they are feeling prepared around this topic, because let's call it out. We might give it a lot of names, C2C, etc. But I think the elephant in the room today is the e-invoicing mandates that are coming down with speed in the next couple of years. We'll give a few minutes for our audience to cast their votes. But in the meantime, Manuel, Raul, let's bring you in from a perspective of what are you thinking? What is happening in your organization? What's different?
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So I think one of the major areas that are different is just the way how we are exchanging data with the authorities. I mean, if we all think about it, how was it 20 years ago? When you have a deadline approaching and you know that you have to click a button and submit total values. It was, these good old times when you submit only a total of the exports, total of the domestic sales, total. And then if you have an audit, they probably ask you about few invoices and you can explain the transactions. Maybe you have a paper invoice when something is missing. Okay, yeah, you have to fix it. And that was more or less, let's say, the indirect tax compliance part. So this is why indirect taxes was so attached to the accounting, let's say, role or tasks. Yeah, you need to submit something in a certain time. The last 10 years, if not the last 5 years, we have to submit such an extraordinary amount of data to the authorities, sometimes even in real time. That is just scary how everything changed so fast. Because this is why now all of us are talking about data. We are not talking anymore about a total value that is probably not much in a GL account. We are now talking about where is the HS code, commodity code, where is the net wage, where is this VAT number of the customer, of the vendor. And this is why I think we need to focus more and more and more about the processes. Because if we, as an indirect tax person, understand the processes, we really understand where we can guide our colleagues who are totally lost. If you go to people from logistics, from accounting, from master data team, customer service, they are really lost when they get these questions from us. So if you are able to guide them to get closer to them. That means you understand their processes. You can really start creating awareness in the organization, creating internal trainings, learning how they are suffering in their own processes. And you can really get probably closer to that magic moment when you understand what you are submitting to the authorities. So this is more or less what I think we need to jump in more and more as indirect tax experts. We need to be more closer to the processes and understand the people who are working on those processes. And then we can really be upon more and more control on the data we are submitting to the authorities. How we gain control as well, then we go to the systems. So right now, I see only two ways to gain this control. Either you have tax engines, or either you have really a good understanding on your own system. Both will require maintenance. So again, you have to be closer to the processes in order to make sure that they are really reflecting how the system is set up. So this is more or less what I see now, this exciting moment, yeah, for being an indirect tax person. Jumping from the submitting data into process expert and then gaining the data control. It's more or less, what I wanted to say now, which is summarizing what we are discussing already.
And I do rely on what you say in terms of processes, because we see that, well, we were using a kind of, we had time before we submit our data, and we still had time before tax authorities comes to us and raise the question, right? We could make our controls a posteriori. The important was to have things filed on time. And then you could always have some more time to think about, okay, our controls in place, is that correct, yes or no? You don't have that time anymore, and in the future you will even have the question before you even submit close or close to
Exactly.
that, right? So we see the number of requests of tax authority drastically increasing in the last year, from our side at least, where any variation, any trend which is no longer followed is pushing a question from tax authorities, both intrastat but also VAT returns, which are very painful for the teams, right? Because they still have to make their work in terms of submitting, making the controls, but on top of that, there are all those requests which were before a yearly audit you had. Now it's monthly questions in some countries.
Exactly.
At the same time, I think, Manuel, what you are saying is so Raul, because I keep on confusing your name. So
I know.
Raul, I'm afraid that what you're saying sounds really the way forward, but at the same time, it looks like it's trying to boil the ocean, because let's be clear, all of our companies generate a lot of data, and we are not owning the data. So if we need to chase all the teams that are generating data, and in order to understand what they are doing, that's a full-time job.
Yeah, indeed.
And I can imagine that you feel the same way as I do, that we are very stretched, right? Our teams are really overloaded, they have a lot to do. So it seems to me that it would be also difficult to justify to our management, especially there in the US, right? Because most of our companies are American based, that we need to do all of that, because and this relates to a conversation I had yesterday with somebody reporting to me. She wanted to review all the processes in Latin America, and I told her, I mean, let's start with what is material, right? And let's try to I don't know, highlight. I mean, the areas where you think we are weaker, or where we may be more exposed. But I mean, you cannot really tackle everything at the same time in the next couple of months. So let's be realistic. So here, I guess that maybe good to understand at least. I mean, who are the stakeholders? Who are generating all the data? Train them to understand that they own the data, right? If something is coming, they need to fix, because otherwise you will get to the other side of the spectrum. You have people in my team in Brazil, and they're spending a lot of time correcting invoices, because just for a few cents, I mean, invoices will not get through. So, and I cannot. I mean, I want them to stop doing that, but they've been doing that for so many years that, I mean, it's everybody understands that this is the job. Right? It's not. So it's a bit of fighting back. So my reflection here is that these are really troubled times, because we need to reinvent ourselves, but at the same time we need to be really careful with not becoming something that we are not willing to do, which is being owning all these processes, and being the ones that are really, I mean, on the backs of APAR all the time, right? Telling me, no, you need to change this line, right? This is wrong. So I think we need to find a balance, and that's really, well, it's the art of our jobs, right? We need to figure it out. I mean, depending on what is the strategy of the the company, the tax department, what is the time availability, and I think there's not really anything like a one-size-fits-all approach to that, right? I think we can do what Manuel is saying. It's fast to find. One is saying it's probably more skeptical. Maybe it's in between would be the ideal. But yeah, there are a lot of questions that we need to ask ourselves about what's coming up and how to react to that.
Mm-hmm. I agree with all the things that they have been said about what Raul was saying, that is the processes needs to be reviewed. Sometimes the risk that we have is that we are very much control on the processes before there is a new mandate is going live. We review everything. We ensure that the data is correct. But what happened the day after? Sometimes there is a problem. The data is reliable the day zero, but the day after, it's when they need to train the teams to continue monitoring. That, as Korka was saying, we are not the owners of the data, but we need to define strong procedures in terms that they create the data which is accurate and which is compliant. Because what we have right now is tax authorities are more interested in data rather than on what they can collect from the returns. It's more valuable what we are reporting through these mandates rather than anything else, rather than the money itself that they can collect with the new measures or whatever. So they are more interested in data, and slowly they are not processing as fast as they can get all the revenue that can get only with the data. But it's something that is going to become even more a challenge in short term. So when they start to process the huge amount of data that companies are submitting.
Fair enough. Robert, this might be a great opportunity to bring in our audience's views on this as well while we continue our discussion. Let's see how they're feeling.
The poll is still open technically, so if you haven't voted, you have 5 seconds, maybe 10.
Going once, going twice.
Going once, going twice. But the results are pretty clear.
Oh, okay. Good to know.
We got 50%, 52% just starting to look at it, early and exploratory.
Oh,
wow. 32%, almost 33%, somewhat prepared. 30% was somewhat prepared. 8% fully prepared.
Wow, I want to meet the guys who are fully prepared.
Yeah, me too. I want to meet those guys. Yeah, the 8%.
Please raise your hand later on. We will have you on the next session and panel of how you got there. But going back to the results, I guess everybody's feeling like in the same boat. This conversation is taking an interesting turn whereby a lot of our questions that are supposed to be next already get blended in because they are also interconnected. Like Raul, you started talking about the human aspect of processes, and we already started to see the glimpses of how this is going to impact the future of our jobs, the skill set, the roles and responsibilities, and how much we are willing to take versus how much we should or shouldn't have under the remit of our roles. The example that really comes to my mind is the world of finance, where SOX controls in systems that are ERP based also create division of labor and responsibility across the board. So are we headed there? Who knows? But Alexandra, what do you think about this aspect of human intervention in all this, the skilling, reskilling, future of our roles and responsibilities?
Yeah, that's a very good question. We have quite some ideas and thoughts about it because this is, of course, a continuous effort. And I think indeed in the last couple of years, it became very clear that we can no longer just be tax advisors, right? It's not that we give a memo and then we just sit back and see how other people implement it. You need to have a certain mindset, I would say, being very proactive, assertive, and follow through. And that being said, I think in my view, there are, let's say, 3 other areas where I think people can really benefit being a tax professional. In my view, that's becoming data literate. It doesn't mean always that you have to become a data analyst or a data engineer or a data scientist, but there needs to be a way to understand, have the data relatively quick available to you. And then, of course, there needs to be skills to analyze the data. I also think from a technology point of view, you need to be able to use certain tools or technology to help you with, for example, the analyses or pull reports, or be able to modify reports, given that unfortunately the data requirements differ and the regulations differ. And then thirdly, I think this is really beneficial, is to understand the key principles of project management. I think our work is becoming more project-based. I see an e-invoicing mandate also as a big project. And I think here it very much helps if you're able to do RACI or understand how to prioritize on the basis of risk, stakeholder management. So I think there are a lot of, let's say, complementary skills that tax professionals need nowadays.
So you have really sprinkled that multidisciplinary angle on this one, not just in addition to the various teams and stakeholders that this group has been referring to. Thank you. That is another great but very important way to rephrase this. Ignacio, what do you think about the future, the skill we need, what is going to remain and what's going to completely disappear from the way we do things today?
I agree with
skills-wise.
on what Alexandra was saying, is that right now is that our role is more a project manager. Sometimes we need to be closer or be sometimes as kind of a best friend of IT departments. So because the interconnections between the projects that they have to run, or due to all those mandates on all these invoicing real-time reporting, so that we need to be kind of a part of the IT. So we need to be familiarized on the topics and the way that they work, to understand the processes, to be able to help them. And also what happens is that our roles need to be more pragmatic. It's no longer, or there is no much need to prepare long memos. Now they only need to know which is the tax code to be assigned sometimes, rather than to know the treatment risk is which is the tax code and which is the potential risk. That's all. They don't. So it's becoming more and more. All the work that you have done before is you need to answer in 1/10.
So the tax technical knowledge is answer, and patience for it is shrinking. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah.
Okay. We need to keep it snappy and short. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Delphine.
Yeah, no, what you've said is exactly it. The people, your stakeholder, they don't want to know what's the law. They just need to know what's the outcome and whether and how it can fit within their process, or how they can reply to your requirements without disrupting too much their own task. So you really need to be pragmatic and being able to find the right place and the right stakeholders to implement your process and your control points.
So we seem to be going back to the point, Raul, you raised today and before as well, which is this is becoming very interpersonal, skill-based back management too.
Indeed.
So
indeed, yeah, because
bring your friendly faces to the world.
Yeah, it's exactly what Gorka was saying. Yeah, we cannot be everywhere, because if we think about the influence of indirect taxes, along when you are negotiating the contract with a vendor or with a customer, it's indirect tax there. When you set up those materials that you will buy or sell, or the customer or the vendor, you have as well indirect tax component. When you enter the sales order, when you produce the invoice, when you post the invoice from the vendor, when you raise the payment with the bank, it's always indirect tax on those processes. So it's technically impossible to be ourselves, process owners on all these stages of the process. What we can do is we can be closer enough to them so they are at least involving us in an early stage. How many of us know about a project when it's already live, for example, And exactly. And if we are successful, they are counting on us from the very beginning. And this is the ideal scenario. And then from there, we can start slowly. Of course, we can never be process owners. I fully agree. And then this is one very important interpersonal skill. The other one, Ignacio, you mentioned be the best friend of the IT department. Indeed, and this is hard. How many times we have gone through projects that they are postponed in the last minute? And then you have to explain to IT, sorry, it's postponed. Okay, when is the new deadline? I don't know. So this is as well where interpersonal skills become very important. Yeah, it's my opinion.
Yeah, fully agree. Sometimes that takes away our credibility, right? If indeed we are so late with notifying, and that's not necessarily on us, but yeah, because there are changes in the roadmap go live dates.
Very valid point. It's almost like we have to have constant awareness, constant interactions. But I'm going to throw a curveball here. Then how does this impact our ability to be effective, given we have now remote working, we have hybrid ways of working, we may not be going into offices at all, water cooler moments aren't happening? Does anybody want to share a strong opinion to or fro or about the abilities that it impacts?
I would say, and I think it's already been raised, but really spend time working on your network internally. And I think also what will really help, and that's alluding to the PMO, project management skills, having clear ownership, who owns, for example, e-invoicing in the organization. Is it tax, or is it IT, or is it finance? And once you have that clear, then you also have, I think, I would say, a much more of a sense of doing it together, really working together as a team. And in my view, that should be more of a centralized team to help with these type of implementations. But I think, you need to invest, in your connections.
So does any of you have already built such cross-functional teams or a sort of committee internally for electronic invoicing? Are you headed that way? Are you planning, or it's just you'll have to roll with it as it goes?
To the point of raised by Alexandra, what we've done, at least in my company, is a cross-functional team. We've defined, because that was my requirement, the roles and responsibilities of every member. Because what I found it at times is that many people in the business, especially, were assuming that since invoices is a mandate coming from the tax authorities in the country XYZ, that then it's tax who needs to lead all the initiative. And I was opposed to that on the basis that we don't really know on the invoicing stream. So we only report transactions that are posted by others. So thanks to that, now I think there's more clarity about what the tax needs to be doing. But basically, it's, inform everybody that something is coming. Try whenever possible to summarize the key requirements. Bear in mind there are technical requirements that none of us, I think, can interpret correctly, and there where we need to rely on third parties to do the heavy lifting with the translation of all these rules. And then in this race, we also mentioned what IT needs to be doing, etc. We also have had a lot of discussion between at the steering committee level about which direction we are going to take, whether we are going, for example, to rely on the native ERP we are using to create these invoices, or whether, when possible, or whether it's preferable to trust in third parties. We can name a few, but this is not the place. Everybody knows quite a few companies that are very competent in that area, that can act as an interface between, companies like ours and the tax authorities, and eventually the portals that the tax authorities are using to receive and process those invoices. So I like that approach, because at least for finally we are setting it alive with about what the tax rules should be. And then, you are participating in many discussions, but then the teams that are really in charge of raising the invoices then get more actively involved in all of that, rather than sitting a little bit back and then expecting that somebody else will pull the trigger and do the job for them. So I think that is probably the only way forward. I see that we can really cooperate with others at the same time, do the networking that Raul was mentioning, that is important, and not get too much involved to the point that you need to be, I don't know, doing things which you have no clue about.
Fair play. Robert, how are we on time? And again, a request to the audience, feel free to send us your Q&A. We can start tackling those as well.
13 minutes.
Excellent. Last but not the least, like I think this question has come up in its different forms. I can see one in Q&A already, which is what sort of standards are we leaning towards, and what types of IT tools, and not necessarily providers, but what types are the forum finding useful so far? And they need not, like, it could be a mix of, I completely understand, tax technology to some of the quite out there, or it could be some basic stuff like, I don't know, what's the spectrum from Excel to, I don't know, a very highly powered tax engine. How are we doing today as things stand?
I think it's a variety of different tools. We have quite some dashboards. We try as much as possible to already use technology that that IT has licenses for, because that's an easier way to be able to use them. But I think a lot is around data visualization, dashboards, being able to build and prepare your own reports. So tools around that as well. We also indeed are looking sometimes at an engine or let's say a provider who could help sometimes with automation of the text determination. And like I said, a preference to use as much as possible one vendor for e-invoicing across the globe. Some ideas of mine.
Delphine, any noted tech?
Yeah, so I think fully agree on the single provider where feasible, of course, for e-invoicing. For the compliance in the old way, the periodic compliance, well, we had developed an RPA, which was extracting automatically all the data, sending to our service provider for the VAT compliance. That was nice, but we see the limit of it with all those changes, right? As mentioned, the set of data that you ask and that we had with this RPA in place and data extraction is no longer enough now. So, well, adjusting to that is pretty costly. So we're in the phase where we have to rethink our strategy around that for the future.
Makes sense. Ignacio, anything else that we have used which is going to help people think out of the box?
No, I mean, I agree with what Alexandra and Delphine they said. One of the things is mainly the company needs is tax engine or SAP add-on to process the data to ensure that we are doing correct. But sometimes you need to know first is that it depends on the type of business, because some tools don't work for once or not doesn't work for another one, because they are more they can deal with the data that you have much better than another ones. The retailer, the tool that they need is different than another ones, but at the end is ways you can automatize to review all the bunch of data, even that afterward you have a third-party provider who is going to do the double check, or they are going to check it, but you need to automatize the check of the data.
Thank you. I think Gorka had already predicted this by saying earlier, no cookie cutter approach is going to work. So fair enough. And here's the variety, right? Like we see tons of existing known tools plus some very creative ways of getting your means to your ends. So fair play. There's another very interesting question, which is a bit around what I would call known non-compliance, but it can be a bit harsh if I put it that way. So rightly asked by Martin around how frequently do you in different organizations see incorrect data or for example the wrong VAT numbers, right? We have seen these things when we even did things like EU sales list and interest ads. You would have a bit of a mismatch or missing pieces or incorrect VAT treatment or rates from AP invoices. Like if you were to put sort of a ballpark, I don't know, can you put figures on some of these things or tell us why certain things happen more than the others? It'll be our audience might find it useful today. And don't worry, we don't have tax authorities in the room, and we're not saying this is non-compliance. We just everybody's trying to feel the pain or maybe the levels of best operation. Like we know 100% is not really still achievable.
I think everyone in general, yeah, is trying to be fully compliant. This is why we are discussing about tax engines, knowing the processes, getting the network. It's just to be compliant. Now, fully compliant. Who can define what is the meaning of being 100% compliant, and what is the cost of being 100% compliant? Because what is the time effort that you need to spend to correct or adjust an invoice for 50 euro when you have balances of 100,000? So I think this is the pragmatical question that we have to ask ourselves almost every month when we are preparing or filing VAT returns. And probably is the questions as well that the audience are asking themselves every month.
So you're saying materiality tends to kick in again
Exactly.
at a known,
It really depends on the
level.
company, the scenario, even the month, because some months you have high revenue, some months lower. But yeah, I mean, everyone is trying to be fully compliant. Yeah.
Different views, perspectives on this one?
I fully agree on the ambition, but I do also say, fully hear Raul's point about being pragmatic as well. And we cannot jump on every known issue. I do think when you see it's recurring and it seems to become more material, then obviously you need to definitely let's say look into it, and here again prioritization of risk etc can help to see which one you want to tackle first. But I think it's a known issue. We all, I think, have some issues with our own data, but of course our vendors do have that as well.
So is anyone being propelled into changes ahead of mandates because that's what their customers are already doing, or their suppliers really want to get ahead of? Like, do you have those circumstances emerge yet? This is my extended question, by the way, not from the audience.
Not from our side. I mean, generally speaking, we make use of the last deadline to before being ready, unfortunately, because everything takes time, right? We have, well, the changes in SAP requires sometimes quarterly release. So it means you really need to plan upfront. If the quarterly release is planned in July, your go live is in June. Well, you start already. So there's real, well, issues and constraint from external, well, internal parties, but from other departments that you need to take into consideration. And being ahead of a mandate, well, it's not something that we've experienced. We generally running for for the readiness, let's say.
Thank you.
And it also comes to the point about customer experience also quite often. We are dealing with also different sizes of companies that who are our customers. Not everyone will be equipped to process, for example, incoming e-invoices. So sometimes it's also not something you want to do, but I do think there are also benefits of more automation and e-invoicing, but I think maybe at a future date.
Any closing comments on that note? Because now I can see the time and the clock ticking in our favor, but we have touched a lot of topics here. Maybe not everything has been covered off and ironed off for each and every person listening today. So please feel free to ask more questions. We can get back to you separately. But any closing comments, guys, on for our audience, which is still feeling very underprepared or on early days for the biggest change that our landscape is going to see in Europe in the coming years?
Well, it looks like we are all on the same boat. Yeah, this is one of the most comfortable things to hear. I'm not the only one, let's say. And then it looks like we are all heading into the same direction, yeah? Gaining more automation in the analytics and gaining more control on the processes, via tax engine or more control in our own systems. I think it's more or less the summary.
Thank you. Any last final thoughts? Ignacio, Delphine, let's roll it.
No, I think
I would
maybe
say,
oh, sorry.
sorry, go ahead.
Delphine,
Yeah.
go.
No, I think an interesting point that we've not really touched, but we discussed when we, regrouped last time was the big difference between continuous transactional reporting and the e-invoicing, where e-invoicing really raise a full level of responsibility across the company because it goes about e-invoicing and collection of your money, while C2C remains a real tax burden and responsibility. So I think in a way, I prefer, if I need to choose between both, the e-invoicing because it has a broader sense of responsibility across the company in terms of we need to do that right. Otherwise, we're gonna have issues with our customers and with the collection of the money.
Fair play. Do not mess with the cash flow of your business because that's what keeps it running. So, yep, point noted. Robert, over to you. This has been insightful. I could run this for another 60 minutes, but we have to be respectful of our audience's time today.
Yes, I feel like we're all in one room. The flow of the conversation was like any in-person panel discussion I've ever seen in any of our tax events. So it's been a pleasure from my side to hear the same eloquence as always from our panelists. Thank you, Gunjan from Vertex, and from all of our panelists, Raul, Delphine, Gorka, Ignacio, Alexandra, and to you in the audience for your interaction with the questions and the polls and the comments. I hope to see you again at some other panel discussions, virtual ones that we're going to do later on in the year. Really like to see these thumbs up from the audience. Keep them coming, because if you enjoy this event, we're just going to keep doing them and bring everyone together virtually and hopefully more often in person as well. You'll hear from us in the coming weeks for another meeting, and then there's also a corporate tax event in November as well. We hope you can join that. So thank you, everyone in the audience, and for those of you who saw only part of it or missed it, you can rewatch this video using this platform, using the same event link. So feel free to do that. We will keep in touch as things will only get more interesting in the coming months and years. So just going through these lovely comments from the audience. Appreciate it. Dorisana, Faisal, Marios, appreciate it, and hope to see you again in the future. Again, thank you, panel. See you again, whether virtually or in person, in the near future. To everyone, have a good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you are, and we can't wait to see you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. And the lobby remains open if any of you want to have a chat there virtually. See everyone later. Next time.
See you. Bye.
See you. Bye.